Our next speaker brings a unique perspective on causal modelling for social causes. So please welcome Gideon Wilkins, Group Head of Research at McCann Worldgroup. Gideon will be exploring how causal modelling is being applied to understand and influence social dynamics. And as always, continue using Slido for your questions throughout Gideon's presentation. Please welcome Gideon.
Thank you. It's 3:30. You've had a long day. Would anyone like to see some magic? Yes, so would I. So if you know anyone that does, come and see me after the show, because I don't know. But what I'm going to do is show you something that is a useful demonstration in-house. As if by magic, I'm going to make this item here in the world of science move without touching it. Isn't that amazing? And also, I'm not allowed to touch anything that does touch it until after I've touched it. So we'll put that there. And then as if by magic, look, watch this. You're going to be amazed. And if it stays up, I'm going to touch this one, and this is going to move. Amazing. Thank you. Not sure why I gestured for a round of applause. No one was surprised at that. Now, my talk today, I'm not a statistician. I am a researcher, but I don't have some of the how-to charts that you've been seeing so far today. My role within McCann Worldgroup, we are an advertising and communications agency, and I run a team called Truth Central, the very grandly named and occasionally mistaken for a certain new social network that someone set up. It's not that one, it's different. Truth Central, we do a lot of work with our clients around cultural movements. We look at things like brand roles. And in particular, what we started looking at is an understanding of how we can look at more cause-based analysis and data analysis on some of the things we're predicting for our clients. My particular role is head of commercial intelligence. Now, commercial intelligence basically means I have to show to my clients how our research can make them more money. And in helping them see it's going to make them more money, they give my employer some money, and they give me a little bit of that money at the end of the process. It's kind of trickle-down economics in a kind of one relationship stage. So as an organisation, we are this intelligence company on the quest for truth. It makes me sound a bit like a knight on a shining steed. I sometimes compare myself, as in fairy tales, to Rapunzel. If you know the story of Rapunzel, he took some basic substance of straw and turned it into gold. We take data and turn it into gold for our clients, for ourselves. And our approach is to combine what we call human sciences and marketing sciences. Now, in the olden days, that basically meant qualitative research and quantitative research. But today, in the world of causal modelling, AI, big data, digital twins, human sciences and marketing sciences actually live across the methodology spectrum. What I hope to leave you with today is some ideas and approaches for how you can talk to the rest of your business about causal modelling. I'm aware that a lot of what you've learned today, particularly if you went into some of Stream 2, where I sat there and I understood about one word in 5, and then I came to this one and I understood about 50%. I was like, okay, I'm doing better. What I want to give to you is the language and the tools to talk to your business partners, to your marketing leads, to your CEOs, to your growth leads about causal modelling in a way that they can understand. Maybe you go and use some Dominos to give them an understanding of what we're talking about. I'm going to illustrate it with a particular example. This is a client that we worked with, and they were concerned about candy culture wars. I was going to say chocolate culture wars, but it doesn't quite, it doesn't have the alliteration. So candy culture wars, from broad, fairly unifying issues, such as ageing, children's well-being, through to more divisive, unfortunately, issues, such as gender stereotypes, LGBT plus issues, labour laws. And there are some brands that kind of lean into that very heavily. I remember the first time I saw Tony Chocolonely and thought, wow, I didn't know I had to make that decision, and now you've nudged me to make that decision. Do I want my chocolate slave-free or not? To the other end of the scale, to brands that are a lot more kind of politically neutral, that are concerned about their 48 versus 52%, which is a percentage that oddly is appearing across so many countries at the moment in terms of political division, one way or another. So how do you as a brand navigate through possible things that you can jump on board with, but not carry the risk of potentially having some of the things that you might have seen in the news where people have gone down a route of a social cause And then cancel culture has jumped on the bandwagon. You might have seen what happened to Bud Light. They went down a route of perhaps an A/B test. It went wrong. They lost millions, apparently, off share prices. And so brands are increasingly concerned about how can I stress test a possible outcome without risking alienating half of my customer base. Now, historically, my background is in brand and comms research, and I worked for many years at Kantar, and the traditional methodology for testing some of these elements are sometimes to ask people really direct and slightly clumsily, if this brand supported this cause, would it make you more likely to buy the brand? This is a really dreadful way of testing whether or not this is a good idea to do or not. People massively overclaim that they're going to change their behaviour based on particularly altruistic and positive outcomes. They might say they will, they usually don't. The other way is more kind of clever controlled A/B tests. I'm sure many of you have come across things like MaxDiff or conjoint analysis. Again, historically, that was like the safe pre-test way of testing claims and possible pack updates. And sometimes what people would do is they go down the route of in-market. They go, let's do a limited edition. Limited edition are essentially real-world A/B testing of what happens if. Walkers are brilliant at it with some of their limited edition flavours. They basically get to go out and test new flavours under the guise of kind of football-themed or event-themed flavours. Now, what we've been doing, working with a variety of tools, and what I want to do is kind of illustrate how this is living in the real world, because our clients are making multi-million dollar, pound decisions. They're needing us to come up with more sophisticated ways and more trusted ways of getting to that answer. Some of that you've talked about today. Obviously, causal modelling, going beyond patterns of understanding the why. The other things that we integrate into this, though, is applied behavioural science, which is much more on the side of kind of psychology, neuroscience, understanding why humans behave in a certain way. Sometimes by adding on the principle of the why humans behave in a certain way helps you tell a much richer story around the patterns that you find in causal modelling. And then the third element that we are doing, and I would encourage you to look into in the way that you're using your data, is data fusion. With the methodologies in data fusion, it allows you to start pulling in lots of different data sources, and in doing that data fusion, you suddenly have a much bigger set of dominoes to be able to play with. Now, I'm going to show you some examples of how we talk to our business about these principles. Hopefully this will be useful toolkit or language. If I ever hear someone say right brain, left brain again, I'm going to go up to them and shake them and say it's been debunked ages ago. Never mind, it's a really useful analogy. System 1 and System 2, however, is a much more science-based methodology. You've probably heard of System 1 and System 2. It's been around for about 10 or 15 years or so. If you haven't yet, read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. That was the book that introduced this language. But essentially, System 1 is the bit that makes us more like a human. It's our monkey brain, lizard brain, intuition, gut reaction, the speedy instant response, the bit of our brain that we make probably 29,000 decisions a day on, maybe more. And then System 2 are those moments of consideration and deliberation and pause. There are some things that are day-to-day habits that are System 2. We were chatting with a retailer recently, and they'd been encouraged to use System 1 principles to plan some of their future upgrades. And I said, you're a supermarket. Changing a supermarket isn't a System 1 decision. For some people, it's changing their bus route. It's having to go around a different route around a supermarket. There's a huge amount of unconscious disruption happening there. So therefore, you need to think about System 2 reasons to push that person into a supermarket they've not seen before. So yes, System 1's hugely in vogue. It doesn't mean that System 2 doesn't matter. But essentially, understanding what makes us human rather than just animal will mean that you can add some really interesting stories and layers over the top of your causal modelling data. My colleague, Annie Howe, who's our head of data and AI, who would have been much more at home in the stream too. This is her professor, and I love his reaction at the end. It's wonderful, just the delight. This is what we talk to people about. When we're talking about applied behavioural science, causal modelling, we're talking about nudges. And our clients can understand small nudges. What are the small taps and nudges we can take that will have an effect later on down the line? They're always looking for nudges. In marketing and advertising, they're always trying to find the little things that allow them to nudge a little bit of behaviour. And so, again, in terms of things you could go away and read in order to start using the language of, I guess, the language of humans. We understand the concept. I can chat to my kids about nudges, the things that will, how can I nudge you to tidy your room? How can I incentivize you? What are the things that will lead you to studying the things that I might want you to study rather than the things that you might want to study? There's big things and small things. Now, obviously, with causal modelling, today's session would fly way, way over the head of the majority of your colleagues in the places that you work at. And so the way that you start talking to them about what causal modelling helps you to do needs its own metaphors. And one of the reasons why I brought Dominos today, I think Dominos, if you've ever played with a Domino set as a kid, you understand that principle of being able to nudge one thing and a long line of things coming out. So tapping which domino would lead to the maximum number of dominoes falling? Bottom left, bottom right, or the one at the top? Hands up for the one at the bottom left. Any? Bottom right? No? Top? Okay, brilliant. That was pretty easy, wasn't it? And this is what traditional drivers model does. You kind of run drivers through 3 or 4 scenarios, the weakness of that, and I see this in my team. I run a research team. We'll still use some traditional drivers and analysis models. And after we've run it 3 or 4 times, do you know what happens? We get tired. Emotional human fatigue sets in and goes, I think I've found a good enough model. It tells me that the fit is pretty good. I'll go with that. It's 0.65. I'm okay. Client will accept it. And naturally, there's a tendency for us to go, I'll tap 1, 2, or 3. Now, interesting thing about this one in the bottom left corner, I think possibly that's going to miss the one above it. And the only way to test usually is actually to go into a real market test and actually do a packaging thing. And you might develop all of this packaging, test it and go, oh, nothing happened. Oh, dear. Now, let's see, because you all got this one right. Now to bring to life the principles of what we talked today. Now tell me, tapping which one domino would have the maximum number of domino effects. Now bear in mind, any smart... That one over there, okay, brilliant. Prove it. And obviously, as you know, this is what causal modelling done. Now I intentionally picked this one because if someone said, oh, just the one at the start, don't be silly. There are loads of breaks in this. This is not a finished model. This is not a finished data set. So you can't just go, I'll tap the one at the front and it'll do everything after it. So, that one looks like it might do, but it ends over there and over here. I was looking, oh, this one looks pretty good. It goes around here and back up to there. So the brilliant thing about causal modelling that we love, that we can tell to our clients, is imagine a model that would allow you to tap every single domino in every single direction, and none of them have fallen over yet. Now, I recognise that in this room, there's a bunch of statisticians. You're probably sat there going, Gideon, that's not quite how it works. And when I speak to Annie, I say, Annie, please do be a pedant and tell me the things that I say that are outright wrong. But also in terms of us being able to bring this to life to a CMO who might have done a bit of market research in his business degree or master's when he did it, but is a long way off that kind of understanding. These are the kind of narratives and stories that we can tell them that allow them to go, oh, okay, now I have confidence in your methodology. I don't need to know the formula that sits under it. Nobody knows what the formula is other than the people using the model. The ability to turn it into something that people can understand and feel excited is what matters most. And then just a very brief thing in terms of the way that we're using this data. Historically, data sat in silos. I come from a time when your qual stuff was an entirely different team of people working with their survey data, and then you had like a Nielsen that would deliver sales data, and the only way it was ever integrated was when a client like a Unilever or a J&J or a Shell would say, my 5 agency with their retail data and their survey data and their behavioural data and their social listening data, you 4 people are going to sit in a room and you're going to work out what your unified story is in your data based on 4 people's subject point of view. And today what we can do is we can take data and fuse it and create the brilliantly titled digital twin. Now, if there was an exercise in branding, whoever came up with the name digital twin for essentially data fusion and simulated and synthetic data, absolute genius. Those are the kind of things that gets a client excited. When you say, we're going to create a digital twin of your customer, and it's going to be like Sims, and what we're going to do is we're going to send them into a supermarket. I know I'm in a room of nerds when people get a Sims reference, wonderful. I'm going to send them in the supermarket, and we're going to change things around, and we're going to see if they still buy it or not. And if they don't, we'll change it again, and we'll change it again. And this digital twin will test and test and test. They'll never get tired, and then eventually we'll make the change. Use that kind of language and you get them excited. And the great thing about them being excited, they give you more money and more time and leave you alone to do the actual science that you all love to do. Going back to the domino theory, an analogy, essentially what it allows us to do is bring in lots of different colours of dominoes, set them up in lots of different ways, test out lots of different scenarios to get to the point where we can go, how can we get most blue ones knocked over in the same time without the yellow ones also knocking over? Using that kind of language, however reductive it might feel to you as scientists in a room that's been built by scientists, using a language that allows them to get it increases their trust rather than decreases it. And in terms of the way we then turn that into a model for taking that to a business, it's a wonderful virtuous cycle of being able to say, let's understand humans, the behavioural science, then let's take that into using some sophisticated modelling, then let's bring in some more data, then let's pause and go back to why they're doing this and what was it about the human element that made a difference. So to finish off with an example of how we did that for one of our clients, I want to talk to you about this case study that was a collaboration with causaLens. So coming back to this really interesting question around social causes. Often there's tensions around social causes in marketing environments. As a brand director, the client said, I don't think the average consumer wants to think about politics while they're eating their chocolate bar. Someone also quoted this very famous quote from David Ogilvy, consumers don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And the number of times I've had this thrown at me as a researcher, almost as a reason not to do research, what was wonderful about this, we agree with you, and that's why we're using causal modelling. When I told my daughter that I was going to be here yesterday, I said, oh, it's wonderful. I get to use my favourite spurious correlation story. And she went, I'm baffled that you have a favourite. Does that mean you have many? And I said, guess what is correlated with Nicolas Cage movies. Now, most of you will nod and you'll know it. And she went, it's pool deaths, isn't it? I went, wow, how did you know that? And she said, you told me about 4 times, Dad. So that's my favourite. However, this one isn't a spurious correlation. You might have seen this one before. This is the volume of ice cream sales correlated to the volume of shark attacks. There's a cause behind this, well, not just a spurious correlation. There is a cause behind it, which is obviously heat, temperature. And what we say to our clients is what we're going to do is we're going to find some of the causes. It's the causes behind it that we care about, understanding what's behind the movement. Now, this was the first version of the output from my research team. This was looking at, as part of a data set, we were looking at what is it that will drive what the client cares about. This one over here. Next time I buy a chocolate bar, I would consider this one over a competitor. We ran this model. They came back to me. This was the simplified version. This wasn't the screenshot from the brilliant tool that was modelling it. And I said, I'm not presenting that. That looks way too complicated, way too scientific. And they're like, but that's the simplification. I said, right, let's simplify it again. And so we simplified it again. And we said, okay, let's really, really kind of take this down to a simple principle to say you can have some short nudges on the bottom. This is tasty. I will buy it. That's a short nudge. I have a craving now. I want some chocolate. This one's tasty. I'll buy it. In terms of the nudges, if I had time, the domino effect is I'll tap that one. This comes out as an outcome. However, there's a risk to this one. Because as some of your competitors start talking about principles that are shared values, welcoming a diverse group of people, supporting causes that I care about, very few chocolate bars have ever been number one by doing this. And that was the argument from the brand team. They said you can't build a brand because they'd already tested it on short nudge. They'd gone, let's slap an environmental message onto our packaging. Let's run a single campaign about gender equality. And there was no effect on sales. And we went, no, of course there isn't. Because no one goes into a shop to buy a chocolate bar to be socially responsible. That's not why I went in. I went in for a short nudge principle. I went in to eat some chocolate because I've got a sugar craving. However, over the long term, how would you... And this was the one moment where the client went, I said, how would you feel if in 5 years' time your direct competitor can charge 5 pence more per packet for the exact same size packet? And they paused and they went, okay, yeah, that would be disastrous, given the volumes we're talking about. And that's what we were able to talk to them about, this principle of a long nudge. It's the long domino. You won't see an immediate effect, but we're talking about a 5-year long nudge. We shared with them principles of the IPA. Essentially, this is very popular within the advertising industry, and it boils down to short nudges. If you have a price discount, your sales go up. When the price goes back up again, it goes back down again. Versus long nudge, brand building. Brand building is essentially finding the things that will give you a long nudge into the future to build your long-term sales growth and key strengthen pricing power. What we were able to go back to our client with was to say, using the causaLens model, to say, let's test some long nudges. What's going to happen, back to the dominoes, if we move your connection with point A to point B, nothing's going to happen initially, which is what we said. If you look at the first dot, you said, you're here now. If you move that forward, you'll see no effect. You might lose confidence. Your finance team might go, whoa, why are we doing this? And what we said is, there is going to be a step change. If we set up lots and lots of dominoes and then had one in the middle, went, there's the last one, then tapped it, eventually the long range, the ability to grow. On this measure, it was your credibility and connection to a certain cause. That eventually will lead to a step change in purchase intent and pricing power. So to wrap up, the three things that this project gave us, it gave the client clarity at board level. It allowed them to test 12 to 15 different causes in a safe space without the risk of political pushback. It gave them confidence in the data, not because we explained the magic formulas in the model, but they had confidence in it because they understood the principles behind it. And in terms of the outcome that we were able to show them was, if you do these things, you're building a 5% growth opportunity. So those are the three things that this gave us. So if there are any questions, happy to take them.
There are indeed, don't worry. Thank you. Turn it the right way around. Let's start with the first one. Have you had any success in validating the effect of long nudges?
That chart from IPA is based on hundreds and hundreds of cases. And what they've essentially done is they've gone and looked at hundreds of cases linked to sales and profitability and market share. And in that one, that is one of the most robust pieces of evidence of a long nudge. So if you look up the long and the short of it, is the name of their paper, and that is essentially long nudge evidence. They don't use that language, but that's what it is.
Thank you. We can share these afterwards as well. So that's great. Thank you. So this one, it seems that trust in the models is key to convince C-levels and clients, I guess. How do you approach this? So trust in the models.
Yeah, trust. I mean, oddly, it's not in scientific evidence. The point about confidence in the data came much more from them feeling they understood it as a methodology. With what was essentially, in my mind, a very dumbed-down language. It gave them the confidence of understanding it. It went back to that principle of the applied behavioural science. Talk to them as humans, use human analogies, and that was actually what built the trust more than reams and reams of science.
Makes sense. Going the other way, how do you collaborate effectively when the statisticians may be separate from the subject matter experts who may be separate from decision makers?
Very good question. And I think as with a lot of kind of IT and data and tech, you almost need, a friend of mine is a project manager in developing new software systems. And his job is essentially that. He knows how to speak to data people and then he knows how to speak to the client team. And so if you're only a team of kind of very, very tech people, you're probably going to have trouble speaking to the people that are not at all techie. I'm not applying for a job, but essentially you need someone who understands, I understand 50% of what they say, and I understand probably more than 50% of what the client cares about. So having people that can talk in both directions.
Makes absolute sense. I'll come back to that one in a moment. This is an interesting one. There is a provision in the EU AI Act for psychological influence based on AI. What methods do you envisage marketing companies will have to use to be compliant?
So I don't know the EU legislation. I'll go look it up. We did some research on how people feel about AI in the future of creativity, and we in advertising like to think that we're part of the creative industry. What was really interesting was we asked people to rate how comfortable they were with AI in creativity. At the bottom of the list was poetry and children's stories. Nobody wants those written by AI. At the very top of the list, worryingly, was advertising. So people basically the attitude was, if you're going to interrupt me anyway, then if you use AI, I don't care because I'm ignoring it half the time, so it doesn't matter to me. I don't know about the EU policy, but I'll look it up. But yeah, in principle, people are comfortable with more AI in advertising than poetry and kids' books.
Children's stories. Excellent.
Yeah.
One more question. How do you simulate the impact of social causes on your target variable without historical data?
So this particular, it's a really, essentially, either you can do a time series analysis of social causes. The issue with this category is very few of them have done it, and very few had stuck to it. Often it was tokenistic. And there are some really interesting kind of stories behind that, like, I don't know if you noticed the M&M's, controversy of the M&M's was they changed her shoes. She went from stilettos to slightly more kind of chunky shoes. Fox News lost its mind, and they wanted a cancellation of them for their woke behaviour. As a result, it's really hard to use historic, actual, real behavioural data. With this particular study, most of it was survey data, and then what we're looking at is essentially respondent-level data, looking at their intended outcomes, their attitudes, and then kind of going all the way up and down the respondent level data to get to that.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm actually going to use the words that somebody has posted here. It's not quite a question, but it says, brilliant as ever, Gideon. Thank you.
Thank you.